Yeah, no problem. Can everyone hear me okay? All right, so I'm Nathan Smith. I'm the head of engineering at Wink. Before I was head of engineering at Wink, I was over at Quirky in the same role. And like most of you I just like making stuff, and I sort of got in the hardware space through that. The sort of unique experiences that I've had have been taking really rough ideas to market quickly, and also taking connected products to market. Our job over at Wink is to basically connect all products into a common platform. So I've connected just about and my team have connected just about every type of product you can imagine: Zigbee, Z-Wave, Wi-Fi. We've manufactured our own stuff. We've connected other people's stuff. Just about every type of product is connected to our system, from thermostats to piggy banks. We've got 200,000 users on the platform in the past year, over 400,000 devices, and almost 150 connected SKUs. We get like 2.2 billion sensor events per month. But before I did that, I worked over at Quirky. And over at Quirky, I opened 20,000 retail doors with Ben, and the logistics team did EDI connections with most of the major retailers, warehouse to ERP integrations, that sort of thing. Oh yeah, okay. And just generally, help the team do the technology part of bringing products from a rough idea to retail. And so, you know, what I want to do is just share basically a checklist of the stuff that I found was challenging, and sort of the ways that we solved it while we were over at Quirky and then later at Wink. You need a lot more than just great technology to solve these problems. You need experience, marketing, and legal, but you know, I'm not a lawyer or a designer, so I'm just going to focus on the technology part. Also, I want to highlight that, you know, there are a lot of ways to outsource some of the stuff I'm going to talk about, but one of the benefits to sort of doing it in-house is that you get a smaller team, so you can keep a leaner, you can keep a sort of more efficient company. You need less finance people, less business people to manage fuck-ups at retail, and you can manage the timelines more, so you don't necessarily, you can avoid the situation of, oh, I just had this really successful pre-sale, but now everything's going slower than I thought because, you know, I've offloaded all this responsibility to people that I can't really manage or have any insight into their process. But that said, there are really great alternatives. You know, you can use a manufacturer to do some of the stuff, or hardware accelerators. But you know, if you don't have a mainstream products, the economics might not justify it. If you're making a modular synthesizer or something like that, you might not want to go with the FLEXTRONICS or Foxconn. But that doesn't mean that your product shouldn't exist. So this is a sort of way to do all that stuff for yourself. But the reward for doing all that is that you can actually scale out your business. You know, you don't have to look too far to find examples of companies that have gotten in trouble with sort of offloading too much of this stuff. There's an excellent article in Fortune from January about Jawbone and some of the troubles that they had around this. So if you decide to take the leap, this is the technology that I feel like you actually should spend your time focusing on, and sort of the greatest hits of taking products to market. So the first thing I'm just going to talk about is manufacturing. A lot of manufacturing is building process, great design, but there also is a big technology component to manufacturing. When you are taking a product to get manufactured, whether it's in the United States or China or Mexico, you should be prepared to write special systems just for the factory. Test jigs are pretty obvious. You know, this is a set of Nimbus PCBs being tested. it really helps to get creative with these types of things. You know, if you have a light sensor and an LED in a product, you can test the light by putting a box over it and turning on the LED and making sure the sensor registers a delta. A lot of times, those sorts of shortcuts and workarounds are what save time on the factory line and can really help you cut costs and cut the cycle times. It's also important to write systems for data collection. One of the things that we discovered was that when we were manufacturing things, we were beholden to the actual partner manufacturer to tell us, you know, how many units were made each day, is there a problem on the line, do we get slowed down somewhere? If you build systems in the factories to actually register each unit as it's manufactured and register the test results, you can see in real time when there's problems. It's a lot like server monitoring software, you know, where you might get an alert when a certain threshold is crossed. If you build these systems, you will be able to do the same thing at manufacture time, which can really help to improve speed especially. So like if there's a problem, you want to know immediately so that you can get on the phone troubleshooting it. Sometimes you'll go to factories that don't have internet, that have tricky IT setups, and the solution to that is just to get creative. We paid for internet at factories. We've brought equipment in there, routers, and that comes to the next point, which is that you really want a problem solver on the ground, especially during the pre-production run of any new product, especially connected products. You know, when you have someone that can, you know, smuggle laptops across the border from Hong Kong to mainland, or, you know, be able to deal with internet issues or anything that pops up, things go a lot faster, and you can sort of keep things running smoothly even in the face of inevitable problems. One of the books I found was really interesting about this was The Toyota Way. I think that it's important to be able to think creatively and not just assume that the factory is going to, you know, take care of any problems that arise. It's your product and you know best what's going to help it keep manufacturing smoothly. So this process is all about sustained improvisation and creativity. And you know, it'll definitely test your problem-solving skills in a fun way, and also your ability to endure long, hot van rides and lack of sleep. So the next thing that where technology comes into play in manufacturing is regulatory, especially when it comes to labels, FCC Section 15 A, B, and C for intentional and unintentional radiators, and UL. One of the things that we found really helpful when doing the regulatory stuff in-house was just reading through on the website all of the, you know, FCC Section 15 document. That'll help you sort of stay one step ahead as you're going through the manufacturing process. And even if you end up outsourcing some of the regulatory to third parties, it'll help you manage that process better. I definitely would recommend it. It's not light reading, but it's good to know. I think that if you take care of these regulatory issues early instead of letting them sneak up on you, they won't cause delays, you know, in your initial production run. I think a lot of startups ignore these things until it becomes an emergency. And if you do that, that's one of the things that that causes products to be late and miss, you know, the actual initial ship date that you promised your customers. So yeah, next up I want to just talk about retail. And the key technologies here are EDI and ERP. I know that you're probably a little bit bored already, but this is the key to doing EDI right. And EDI is a document interchange that allows you to send documents about shipments and sales orders and all the sort of business documents that you need to talk to retailers through a asterisk delimited protocol that was invented in the 70s. But it's very efficient. It's the standard until someone disrupts it, which they hopefully will. And at Quirky, this was sort of one of the keys to our success. We were able to open up all those retail doors so quickly because we did the EDI integrations ourselves. We actually went out, spent time on the phone with the EDI desks at Target and those places, and in a lot of cases we were able to get EDI integrations up and running in 4 or 5 days, whereas you'd want to budget something like 4 to 5 months to get an EDI integration up and running for the first time through a provider. One of the things that I found really helpful in doing EDI integrations was printing out the EDI manuals and just having them next to in my desk drawer so I could reference them anytime I was working on it directly. I watched a talk from Inder from Kinsa where he mentioned that he had to get out his old PC to access a retailer's EDI systems. A lot of these types of integrations, you have to be prepared to look ugly and non-hip technology in the face. It's just, it is an old protocol and old systems, and so, be prepared to have to use workarounds like that. Another thing that you'll need to do EDI integrations is an AS2 server. This is actually the transport layer of EDI. So if you're connecting to Target or you're selling to Bed Bath & Beyond or something like that, there actually needs to be a server that sends the documents back and forth and has a constant connection with them. You can do this yourself with OpenESB or Ultra ESB. I've used Ultra ESB at Quirky and really liked it. And now that you have Docker and you can containerize this stuff, it makes it a lot easier to manage than back in the Glassfish era. Additionally, there are a lot of providers that do this for you that work pretty well, like SPS, that are cheap. So the key to all this is integrating your retail, manufacturing, and 3PL docs into one ERP system. And NetSuite is an excellent example of this, or SAP. The key to this is that you want to be able to basically track the unit cost of a product from when it's, aluminum powder in Shenzhen to when it's actually in a customer's hands. And if you don't have all of the different pieces in your logistics and manufacturing integrated into the ERP from the outset, then it's going to be really hard to get back down to that cost. And there's no guardrails here, The customers and the retailers don't give a shit if you don't have this information. It's really easy to lose, information about production costs and time. And so, I think a lot of people assume that this is a finance problem, that they should just take care of it. But really, as like a technologist, it's incumbent upon you to provide them the raw material to do their job, which is why it's so important to get this integrated from the beginning. If you have a smooth process for doing this, you'll be able to optimize your product for cost down the line. You'll be able to make intelligent decisions about who to sell to at what price. It's all one big ecosystem. So the next thing I just want to talk about is a couple highlights of the product technology, which is a little more interesting. So one of the important things that we found is just a plan from the beginning for big data. If you have device state, say you're making a light and you just have the state, whether it's on or off in like a MySQL table, then chances are you're not tracking every change to that state and when it happened and the actor that, that actually made the change in state. You need something that is a little bit more robust than that to do the type of analysis that you're probably going to do as your platform gets bigger, as you scale out. So something like Dynamo to track that state is actually a lot better solution than just keeping it in a relational database like MySQL. The key here too is you're going to have a lot of different sources of data. You can see this sort of diagram of how our data pipeline works. Up on the top, we have server logging data, client-side data, which we track in Mixpanel, sales data, which comes in as POS data from our different retailers, and customer service data, amount of calls, time for resolution, so forth. You want all of that to go into a data warehouse and then have all your reporting living as individual applications that are sort of decoupled from the source of the data. It's really easy to cheat around this and just write reports that run directly off the data source. But having those two things decoupled has allowed us to move really fast. We provide data to all our partners, and we use it day to day for our decisions as far as the product goes. The other thing is just developing a really fast and scalable firmware development environment. Two keys to this are creating a version controlled cross-compile environment. So if you're actually compiling firmware, for an ARM-based product or something like that, one of the hardest things to do is maintain a cross-compile environment that's actually scalable out to the rest of your team. So having this in Vagrant and having the Vagrant file to build this in version control is key. And then also using NFS over SCP, so mounting the application partition to your product. If you're using like an embedded Linux type environment, you're not burning the firmware directly onto the product. Really speeds things up, so that way you can have a one command compile that basically will take compile an entire file system for your product, and then since it's using NFS, it'll automatically be synced, so you can basically power up your product, boot from the shared partition, and be off to the races testing. And those really tight iteration and development loops are helpful in creating the fastest possible development environment for everyone, and not just the person that writes the initial firmware. So with that, I guess we'll take questions.
Sorry. Oh, yeah. Questions? Okay. Okay. Sure.
Hi. Any competitors?
To Wink?
Yeah.
Yeah, we compete with Smart Things. They have a fine product and a very similar system. People often think that we're competing with Nest and HomeKit, although that's not really accurate. We build on top of HomeKit and work with Nest directly to integrate their products. So our main competitor is Smart Things.
Which itself is fairly new, right? The company was just like a couple of years until the acquisition by Samsung.
Yeah, they were acquired last year by Samsung. I think they were 2 years old.
Yep. We had them speak actually at one of the first events of one of the first Hardwired. Great groups of folks. Cool. If there are no questions, actually, it's a great opportunity to get going. Thanks so much for being here.
Absolutely.
And hosting us, and keep hearing amazing things actually about Wink throughout the grapevine in this community. So thanks for doing this and sharing all those lessons with us.
All right. Thanks, everyone.